This is Center Stage, putting your firm in the spotlight by highlighting business owners and other industry experts to help take your firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week we're talking once again about how you can, systematize and scale your firm in order to really achieve the growth that you want. I know in the legal industry, especially for a lot of solo and small firms, hitting that $1 million revenue mark is a really big deal. It's a big goal that, I think most, entrepreneurial, firm owners want to hit. And so this week I am joined by a lawyer who has done a fantastic job at getting to that goal. She scaled her firm, and it's opened up a lot of additional opportunities and extra time to do things like become a guest on a podcast or create the Wealthy Woman Lawyer League, which I'm sure she will talk a little bit more about. Probably also does some other things with the free time that she's created for herself, and that is Davina Frederick. So thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about the Wealthy Woman Lawyer League and why you're so passionate about helping law firm owners, grow their firms.
Great. So I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for about 15 years, and I started my coaching business as a law firm growth strategist, really helping other women law firm owners. At the time, it was other law firm owners, not just women. I did eventually niche down to that, but to apply the business principles that I wish I had had somebody teach me when I started my law firm. So I really learned a lot while I was growing my own law firm successfully. And I felt compelled to share that information with other law firm owners so that they wouldn't have to learn the way I did, which was School of Hard Knocks. So I developed Deep Frederick Media Marketing is what it started out as. And then I niched down to focus solely on women law firm owners a few years ago and developed the Wealthy Woman Lawyer brand. So Wealthy Woman Lawyer is the name of my business. It is a business coaching and law firm growth strategy firm that helps women law firm owners scale their businesses $2 and $3 million. And I chose $1 million because that is, I think we can get a lot done on our own as solos. I've seen my clients go really far in growing a successful business, but you have to become a different person. You have to transform into CEO thinking and CEO mindset to really get over that $1 million mark and go from there. And then there are stages beyond that. But this is kind of that first big marker that people have in their head, because as soon as they make their first six figures, they're like, okay, well, this is not enough. This is not what I was thinking it was going to be. Right.
Yeah.
So they realize that there's more. And the way that they do that, they cannot do that on their own. They really need a lot more to learn how to leverage resources and think in a different way. And so that is really what we're about, is helping them sort of make that transformation.
Yeah. So, I know a big thing that you talk about, is the systemization, the scaling of law firms in order to help, accelerate that growth. In your experience, I mean, what has that sort of thing done? Why was that so important for you and how you grew your firm and how you help others grow their firms?
Right. So I want to clarify, because I think a lot of people, when I say systems, I'm not talking about automation. Automation is something that is applied to systems. And systems have been around long before we had all the wonderful automation tools we have now. In fact, when I started my firm, a lot of the automation tools we have now didn't even exist, weren't even a twinkle in somebody's eye. So being systematic, though, is a way of thinking about something beyond yourself. So it's a way of thinking, if I can create a certain number of procedures or steps that is consistent most every time in getting a task done, I can then, if I document that, I can then pass that off to someone else. And someone else can then do that. And I can work in the highest and best use of my time. Because once I've mastered that, now I want somebody else to take that over and do it. And so sometimes that's people. And fortunately for us, we're in an age now where there's so many automation tools. Sometimes it's automation, right? But systems are very different than automation. And so I think it's critical to growth to learn how to create systems in your business, because you It's the only way that you are going to free yourself up to do the thing that you do best and do the thing you really want to do more than anything, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the purpose of systems.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, like one of our core values here is systems are life. Like we make sure that everything that we have is documented, that, the processes are being followed, but like also that they're being improved on. There's no such thing
Right.
as like a final system or a
Yeah, it's
final
never
process
done.
or yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing that we kind of say, in a joking way is just like if someone got hit by a bus and they just can't come in anymore, can we just pull someone in off the street, have them look at this and then be able to understand how to keep things
Yeah.
moving? And I think for
Yeah.
so many, solo firm owners that they're doing everything themselves, it's a jokey kind of hypothetical situation, but like if something like that were to happen, how many law firms would be able to continue to operate if the owner suddenly couldn't
Right.
keep working? And so, in
Yeah.
your
And you say that
opinion,
to
yeah,
y
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and you say that, in a jokey way, and I agree with you, but what's amazing is how many clients I've had who had the realization because they had life-threatening illness,
Yeah,
and suddenly it took them out of the picture. Maybe it was cancer, maybe it was something happened where they needed to care for a family member. There's so many things in life that can happen that just can knock us out, and suddenly this thriving business goes to nothing because you're not there anymore. And
yeah,
so, really, true wealth and financial freedom comes from having a business that operates when you get pulled out of it and it continues to be a wealth generator for you. So I totally agree with
yeah,
your scenario because it does happen. People get
yeah.
hit by buses.
Yeah, exactly. So and there's two different kind of paths that we can go down, and I want to go down both of them. And the first one I think is, and I want to get your thoughts on this. You know, I for me and what I've seen is one of the big issues is that a lot of firm owners don't like the idea of relinquishing any kind of control. They want to be fully in control of all of this, and so maybe there's that hesitation. They're like, well, no one else can do it as good as I can, so they're not going to do that. you know is that, how do you get someone out of that kind of mindset to where they're more open to documenting these sorts of things and making sure that there's a plan in place?
So I'm so glad you're asking me this question because I actually had this conversation with a client yesterday. She is an amazing, amazing attorney, and she has built. When the start of the pandemic, she fired the few people she did have, and she sat butt in chair and she did everything
Mm,
until recently. And her accomplishment, why I'm so impressed with her is she made it to over $500,000 in revenue. She was eight, eight $100,000 in revenue on her own, which is
wow.
amazing. I
Yeah.
had another client who the most people get to is about 500,000, and then they're just so burned out they can't. So she's literally really burned out. She is working all the time. She goes home late at night. She eats a little something, gets her glass of wine, and works again until she literally just falls asleep. And so the conversation I was having with her was that very thing. She's struggling to hire. She immediately after hiring me, she went out and hired some people. And within a week, they were all gone because what she the issue is not just hiring people. The issue is you have to change your mindset about your how you're going to work. You have to make a decision that
Yeah.
you're going to work differently. You have to make a decision that it is going to be challenging if I've never managed anyone before.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to learn how to be a manager. I'm going to
Yeah.
have to learn how to be a leader who inspires other people. I'm going to have to learn how to train people until I can get people who can train people. You really have to expand your thinking around it, and it's a real challenge when people get so far on their own. But the consequences to her, that's where I start with people. I got her to talk about the consequences of this, and consequences, very real life consequences, could be something falls through the cracks and you get grieved. Something falls through the cracks and you get sued for malpractice. Something falls through the cracks and your client is really screwed over and they've lost millions of dollars or maybe something with their life, right? The
Yeah.
other thing is that the damage to her body and to her life and her relationships and her quality of life. So by
Yeah.
getting her to talk about those, it just brings her back to her knowing that this is not sustainable. And because on a deep level, she already knows it, which is why she reached out to me to begin with. But there's fear around that, because I haven't done this before. I'm not good at it. And the reason that lawyers do what they do, kind of like stay in that controlling thing, it's human nature. It's the place that we have mastery over. So
Yeah.
whatever we have mastery over, that's our comfort level, and we go there. It's I listen to Abraham Hicks, and they're always talking about path of least resistance in a good way. And I agree that there's a lot of people who follow path of least resistance, and it results in good things. But I also think that in cases like this, sometimes people follow the path of least resistance because, so it's easy just to pick up the work and start doing the client work and not take that time out to look at those 100 resumes that she had and sort through
Yeah.
them like we did on the call. I just said, pull them out. Let's just sort through them right now. Because we know there's going to be about half of them, they're going to be throwaway. Right.
Right.
And as soon
Yeah.
as we began to take action on that, things turned around. But the mindset is something we come to over and over again because this is really what we're talking about. You have to become a different person and think in a different way.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple minutes ago about having that kind of CEO mindset, and one of the things that's helped me and helped us, at Spotlight Branding is we did this thing called the Clifton Strengths, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically for those out there who aren't
Yeah, we
familiar
use
with
that
it,
too.
yeah, exactly. So like, it's this big questionnaire that identifies, that ranks kind of 34 different strengths that people have, and they separate those into four different domains. It's four different kinds of people, so to speak, right? You have people who are really influential, you're influencers. You can just win a room over really quick. You can get people to do whatever. There's people who are really good at fostering and nurturing relationships. There are people who are very strategic thinkers, very visionary minded, and then you have people who are good executors. And I think a lot of lawyers fall into that good executing category. They're really great at just focusing in, getting a lot of stuff done. But to your point, when it comes to managing people, when it comes to running a business, I think you have to be able to have more of a strategic mindset to be able to execute a lot of those things.
Yeah. So, it's very interesting that you brought that up, John, because we use Clifton Strengths as a tool. And I get my clients to use it not only for themselves, but as they're hiring.
Yeah.
And what I generally see with lawyers is that they have strategic in their top six. So they'll have maybe a couple different strategic, and then they'll have
Mhm.
executor or relationship or influencer or whatever. But what is so interesting to me is they are very strategic when it comes to servicing their clients. So when it comes to managing a legal case, they're very strategic. They know how to develop a theme. They know how to what they're going to argue in court for a client. They know how to win in
Mhm.
court. They know how to win across the negotiation table, but they do not apply that same skill to their business and to their own business. They can
Yeah.
help other people with their business, but they can't help themselves. And I think that again is something where we always have a blind spot with ourselves. So the more that we can engage with people who are there to support us and help us overcome those blind spots and see around corners that maybe they've been around, but we haven't been around yet,
Yeah.
the better off that we are. But Clifton Strengths, I love it. It's a great tool. I recommend people use it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's really interesting. And it's kind of challenged, kind of my theory on maybe what the issue was. And so, but I like that sort of difference between, being strategic with the cases that they use with their clients versus, overall running a business. Going back a little bit to the idea around control and relinquishing that control, what's kind of some easy things to document and processes to delegate that may be a little bit easier for those control freaks, for lack of a better term, for them to relinquish and maybe
For
make that
lawyers like
process a little
us.
bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so my mind is racing because I have many different answers to this question. So I one of the things that I recommend people do, because when you get like the client I was talking with yesterday, one of her challenges is that she's got so much to do now. She needed help yesterday, last month, 6 months ago, right? So
Mhm.
now she's buried and then she's hiring people and she doesn't have time to train them, and it's an issue, right? How are we going to get people? And so I actually teach a method. This is I'm sure others have come up with this method before, but one of the things that I recommend that they do to start with is just start by documenting your doing. So you're
Yes.
already doing a thing, turn your Zoom camera on, share your screen, and show and talk it through as you're doing it. You have then created a training just by
Yeah.
doing that. And it hasn't taken you any extra time because you had to sit and do it anyway. The only time it took you was to flip the camera on, share your screen, and do it.
Yeah.
And that's a starting point. The other thing is if you're in this case with this particular client, I'm like, have them just sit right next to you while you're doing it and make notes. So there are ways that people can just start without having, because I think most of us, especially if you are a strategic thinker, you're a high achieving person, you think to yourself, well, I need to set aside, it's going to take me 6 weeks to document everything, or I need to set aside, I need to work every weekend documenting everything, or I need to do it. And they make it a big project and then it becomes overwhelming. And so I have this
Yeah.
huge project I don't have time for. It's overwhelming. Therefore, I can't. So I'm going back to that baby step, that path of least resistance, that baby step. What's a baby step we can do that's a path of least resistance for working on your business, just like you follow the path of least resistance for working in your business? What baby step can we do? The baby step is just have somebody observe while we're doing and take notes. That's your first, that's an easy thing to do that's not going to take you extra time. And that's a starting point. Don't get me wrong. There are next steps for that, but that's a starting point for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and I one thing that I tell a lot of lawyers is like there will be some time investment up front in getting this built out. I love the suggestions that you had to reduce that by a lot, really. But it's think about like what the end goal in mind is, right? Like, sure, you may have to spend a quarter or two working some extra hours getting this all put together, but think about the quarters after that. Are you gonna you're
Mm,
probably gonna work 40 hours a week or even less, right? Like, maybe you can go down to a 4-day work week, or and build up
right.
that free time to do all of that. So I think that perspective is really important.
Yeah, yeah. And when you're working with vendors, out instead of hiring employees, you're working with vendors who are providing services. It takes a
Mhm.
little time to communicate
Yes.
what you need to communicate to them. Absolutely. But once that is done, that is off of your plate and you don't
Mhm.
have to worry about it anymore if you've hired somebody who's good and they
Yeah.
follow through and they do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it, right? So you're looking at
Right.
and hiring people with integrity. But that I've definitely done that myself. I do that a lot because my this particular business is I do everything virtually online. I have virtual teams who do all different kinds of functions for me. And one of the things that I think people struggle with is this idea that I have to hire somebody who does all of these things. Whereas, what if you hired a bunch of people and everybody had an expertise in a certain area
Oh
instead of
yeah.
trying to get someone and thinking, and I'll use an example from my own life. Graphic designers and copywriters are two different people. You cannot hire somebody who is going to be a wonderful graphic designer and an awesome copywriter in the same person. It's rare. It doesn't mean they don't exist. It doesn't mean there isn't somebody who exists who can do both. I can do both, but I will tell you that I'm a much
Yeah.
better copywriter than I am graphic designer, right?
Yeah.
And so it's because it works different parts of the brain and you think differently in how you express yourself. So you
Oh
may
yeah.
have to hire two vendors, one who's a graphic designer and one is a copywriter, or hire a vendor who has a team put together like that, right? As an example.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I love that you brought that up because we have our legal marketing trends report. We ask how people outsource, and a lot of law firms they outsource to this one stop shop sort of thing that does everything under the sun. But what we found was about 2/3 of the law firms who do that are very unhappy with the results that they get, and it's that sort of jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing where it's like,
Mm,
yeah, they'll do it, but is it going to be to the level that you really want, and that's going to really meet the expectations that you're setting.
exactly, exactly. Um, you had asked me about systems earlier,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I think that people get when I say to a lawyer systems, or when they say to me I need systems, oftentimes what I find is they think case
Mm,
management system. And case management system is an automation tool that's applied to a system, but there are actually 7 essential systems to running a law firm business. And most people don't really realize that. And so when they go to sort of create systems in their business, they're like, why is this still not working? What is it? What's not happening? They're focused on the delivery, the fulfillment of the legal services they committed to, but they
yeah,
don't think about the marketing systems. How am I going to attract people? My onboarding systems. How am I going to get clients signed up? How
yeah,
am I going to then not only fulfill the legal part of it, which is doing the legal work, but how am I going to provide a high touch customer service experience for that client while without me having to do all the touching, right?
yeah,
Because if you're the attorney, you're busy, but how can I set up a system that is going to provide a satisfactory experience for my clients? So they feel like they're being communicated with and they're understanding what's going on, even if you don't have the time to do it. And then the last kind of what I call a client facing system is how are we going to offboard and remarket and get them back into our sort of marketing thing. And then
yeah,
internally, it's people, finances, technology. How are we going to we need to have a system for not only hiring, but how are we going to train? What's our
yeah.
termination policy? How are we going to grow? How are we going to grow different levels of management within an organization? So many things. So there are actually 7 systems that you need to be thinking about if you want to scale your business, and it's not, case management is not the solution for all of those. Case management tools, they have some great ones that can help. A lot of
Yeah.
them now will have marketing components, and a lot of them will have financial components. But again, they're still tech tools. They're not the system itself, and not you thinking through how you want a thing done and what end results you want.
Right. Yeah. And that's such a good point, because I think you have to have that understanding first before you can even start diving in and figuring out how you even want to set all of that up. Um, One thing that you
Right.
mentioned a little bit earlier on, just in your own journey, is how you kind of niche down your business a little bit more and focused it in a little bit more. And one thing that I see a lot of law firms do, especially kind of early on, is they'll be door lawyers, right? They'll just take any case that comes in because they got to get
I
that
did
revenue
that.
up. Right. Right. So why then, in your own words, I mean, because I know what our opinion on we is, we've touched on it a little bit already. Why does niching down actually contribute more to growth, even though maybe on paper it seems counterintuitive?
Right, right, right. I think the idea is that we want to serve everyone. If everybody comes to us with any legal problem, we're excited. We're out of law school. We got a lot of knowledge. We want to serve. We feel like we have just enough knowledge to be dangerous. For
Mhm.
me, I started out with door law when I opened my solo practice because I didn't know what I wanted to practice. Right.
Mm,
And it was only over time as I started getting cases and going, this isn't really for me. This isn't a good fit. It isn't what I um, thought it meant to be a lawyer or what I wanted to spend my days doing, right? So I do
yeah,
think if you start out that way, that's you're trying to figure yourself out, that's fine. But the faster um, I'm going to use the term specialize and expert, even though I know we're not allowed to say that in certain jurisdictions. But the faster you specialize, the
yeah,
faster you sort of become an expert in one area. There's a couple of things that are going to come out of that. One is that the law is too vast and too detailed for you to be an expert in everything.
right.
However, if you pick a practice area or 2, maybe your personal injury and you like the big paydays, but you also need to do something else that provides that transactional, ongoing income. So you're not just waiting for the big paydays. You can narrow down if you want to a couple of practice areas, but the more spread out you are, the more likely you are to make a mistake because you don't have the deep knowledge that is required that you can really invest in obtaining by going deep into a subject. The other aspect of it is from a marketing standpoint. I have a client in Arkansas who they're criminal defense attorneys, and they're one of the things that they say in their messaging is we don't do divorces, we don't do car wrecks. We don't do divorce, we don't do car wrecks. We are a criminal defense attorney. So if you get a DUI, a DWI is what it's called there, you get a DWI,
Yeah.
this is who you're going to call, right?
Yeah.
So it helps to in your messaging for your marketing to say, I do this thing and this is our area. And the client's going to take away from that. If that's all they do, then they must be experts at it because that's all they do all day, every day. Right. So
Yeah.
for me with this business, I niched down because I had worked with both men and women. I had worked with other types of business owners besides lawyers. Lawyers gravitated to me from a coaching standpoint because they know what I had done. They had seen it and they wanted me to teach them how to do it. So that made sense. But I niched again to just focus on women. And I got a lot of pushback from that. And I still do. I'd be, why do you just focus on women? Well, what's so different about women than men? And what I found was I was putting together in person meetings. And I found that the conversation was different when it was just women in the room, as
Mm.
opposed to when it was men and women in the room. And women have issues that they deal with that they probably wouldn't talk about in front of men, and men probably wouldn't understand it because it's not their lived experience.
Yeah.
So it just became for me something that I was passionate about. And and that niching down helped me. Now it's very clear when people are out there and they're getting all this information from all these coaches about all these things, and you're a woman law firm owner, you go, this person is speaking my language. She is the one who gets exactly what I'm talking about. It's not general like you see a lot of other people. So it can be powerful in a couple different ways. One, deepening your knowledge, and two, in helping your prospective clients find you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you said about, calling you can't call yourself the expert, you can't say you specialize in something, but like if you niche down a little bit and your marketing becomes focused on that one thing, maybe two things that you focus on solely, your marketing does that for you. And like you
Right.
said, like people will naturally just associate you with that
And you're not wanting to
expertise.
call yourself an expert. You want them to call you an expert.
Right.
Right? They
Exactly.
can't get in trouble with the bar for calling you an expert, your clients,
Exactly.
right? That's really what you're wanting is you're wanting other people to make that leap.
Yeah.
And truly, if you do sort of narrow your focus, you do get I have a client who's a family law attorney, and she has grown a really successful family law attorney firm, and they do mainly it's divorces and maybe a couple of other things like prenups or what have you. But by doing that, we've really doubled down on that, and she has developed a reputation. She's gotten a number of appeals in family law cases that she has presented, that she has won.
Mhm.
And so that has her, because of that permission to deepen her knowledge in that area, it has scaled her reputation very quickly because she's able to go deep in cases and really become that expert. And she doesn't have to tell everybody she's an expert. What we're putting out there from a marketing standpoint tells everybody that she's an expert, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a very powerful advantage in your marketing if you do that.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, it also sounds like there's advantages to even niching down within a single practice area, right? Like you mentioned your Arkansas
Right.
client, right? It's like, sure, they're in the criminal defense space, but within that, it's just DWIs, or and they may do other
Yeah.
things there, but like their core message is DWIs. That's our thing. We handle it,
Right,
right?
right, right. And I think people, so you and I know this because we're marketing geeks, but I think people get hung up too on this idea. Well, if I do this, I can't accept anybody else who does anything different, who needs anything different. And that's not true. What we're talking about is what I call cocktail party syndrome. You ever been at a cocktail party and somebody behind you says your name and you turn around because it's just like you just hear your name and you go, hey, yeah,
Mhm.
somebody's talking about me behind me, right? So
Yeah.
you want your clients to have cocktail party syndrome. Every time they hear your business name, they're turning around going, that's for me, right? So that is that kind of effect that we're talking about creating. It's a marketing message. So let's say if I'm promoting that I'm the DUI lawyer, any issues you have, call me. I'm the DUI lawyer. It doesn't mean that I won't handle a theft case that comes
Mhm.
in the door. It just means that my marketing push is on what my biggest uh, bread and butter is, right?
Yeah.
And that I think is something that people get confused about. They think, well, that means I can't take other clients. No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that you're putting a strong marketing message out there. And so you still have some wiggle room if you don't want to spend all day doing DUIs or DWIs, right? Or
Right.
doing other things.
Exactly.
Nobody's keeping you
Exactly.
from doing that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the last thing that I wanted to touch on with you before we wrap up here, another thing that you talk about and that you are particularly passionate about is, focusing on this relationship between having a successful law firm that generates good revenue, good profit, but that the firm owner is not constantly working to generate all of
Right.
that, right? So,
Right.
without giving away all of the insider secrets for free, that's why we want people to reach out to you and work with you. What's kind of what does that roadmap look like? How can a firm owner reach some of those big revenue milestones, but not have to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week to get there?
Yeah. So we do have a very clear roadmap. And it probably would just take me too long to go through the whole thing. But basically, it is this. You have to stop. You have to change your mind about you being the best person for every job in your business. I think we can get very caught up in ego and think that if I had enough time, I could learn how to do anything. I'm a really smart person. And I think that trips us up as opposed to thinking I can hire a bunch of people and they can help me do a lot of things that I don't really like doing, even though I'm smart and I could probably do them myself. And the roadmap, key elements are the roadmap are first of all attracting better clients. We want to attract better clients because that's going to help us generate more money, which is going to help us to do number two, which is leverage our resources. Leveraging your resources means learning how, rethinking and relearning how you manage your time, what you prioritize, hiring a team of top talent and learning how to do that and then how to manage them, and then setting up systems in your business and automating where you can those systems. Those are keys. And then the financial management obviously is a huge piece. We have a lot of people who don't really know how to think like somebody who aspires to be wealthy in terms of managing their business. And so that's a key piece. So that's kind of our quick roadmap. Mindset runs throughout that whole thing. But really, it's attracting those clients who are gonna pay you on time, pay you more, and then once you do that, you have money to be able to invest in the other things that you need to help you scale and grow.
Awesome. And so I think is a great segue. How can people reach out to you to learn more, get the finer details of your overall strategy and all the ways that you can help?
So if you love podcasts, you can check out the Wealthy Woman Lawyer podcast. That's a great place to start. A lot of women tell me that they've been listening to that thing since I started it, and it's helped them so much. So I love putting that out there for them. You can check out wealthywomanlawyer.com or follow me on Instagram at Wealthy Woman Lawyer. I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. Any of that, Wealthy Woman Lawyer. Also, I would invite you if you're interested in systems for your law firm business to visit my website wealthywomanlawyer.com. Click on books and go grab my book, The Wealthy Woman Lawyer's Guide to Building a Systems Driven Law Firm Business. That's a great tool that you can use. It kind of goes through the seven essential systems and sort of the basics on getting started on setting those up.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll make sure all that information is in the show notes. Good stuff. I learned some things along the way. So I know I love the episodes where I learn some things and I try to, and I start thinking about some things. I know that definitely translates over to our audience. One final question before we end everything here is if you had one final piece of advice for our listeners, what would it be?
Oh, well, I think it would be to give yourself permission to be a newbie again
Mm.
around managing and leadership. I know you've worked really hard and you feel a lot of confidence in being a lawyer and starting your law firm, but I think we're too hard on ourselves about learning something new. And if you are wanting to grow and scale your law firm, you're going to need to learn how to be a manager of people and how to be a leader who inspires and be a
Mm.
CEO with a vision. So separate out that your law firm is not your baby. It is not you. It's a separate entity from you. And you are the steward of that law firm. And so you need to develop more skills. You learned how to think like a lawyer in law school. Now, if once you've hung your shingle out and decided to go it on your own, you've got to learn how to think like a CEO. So give yourself permission to feel uncomfortable and also reach out and get support. There are a lot of us out here who can support you in that journey.
Awesome. Good stuff as always. Thank you all for continuing to listen. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Continue to leave us a rating or review if you have not done so yet on whatever platform. They're helpful everywhere that they show up. But that's it. Thank you again so much for listening, Davina. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.